the city of St. Louis, you're listening to the Don't Push Pause podcast with your hosts, Justin Johnson and Lindsay Reber.
Hello and welcome to the podcast.
Welcome back.
Today, I'm excited about the movie we're doing specifically because I know this is one of your favorites.
It is one of my favorites. And I feel like it's a movie that people have heard of, but maybe have never seen, or, you know, they were like, my mom loved that movie.
And that movie is Working Girl. Man, it is such a solid film.
It never stops. And it's almost a perfectly told story, I feel like. It's very fairy tale like in a lot of ways, but it's, you know, set in the heart of New York City and very much not a fairy tale.
And I didn't know this was one of your favorites. I was thinking like we needed to do like an anniversary of a movie.
Yeah, and this is the
30th anniversary.
Yeah, pretty big deal.
I was looking for movies that came out in 1988 and like kind of going through and it's like I saw a few and I was like, well, we already did that director. And then I saw Working Girl. I was like, oh, that's a good, you know, Mike Nichols, good director.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I brought it up to you, you were like, yes, I want to do Working Girl.
I was surprised that you brought it up, honestly.
Yeah.
It's just not, I don't think I've ever heard, not to be super gendered or anything, but I don't think I've ever heard any guy go, man, I really love Working Girl.
Yeah. I don't know. Those were the words that came out of my mouth.
Probably not. I will admit, though, I know this movie because of my mom. My mom loved it, and it affected me in a lot of ways whenever you've gotten fired or left a job, anything to do with having a job or maybe having a hard time.
I think that universally it's a movie that is identifiable of like, yeah, starting out
new.
Yeah, in a workplace, like a new work environment. Yeah. Trying to prove yourself.
Exactly. I feel like if you've ever gotten fired, or if you got fired today, you should really just go watch Working Girl immediately. Or at the very least, the signature Carly Simon song.
Just listen to the song, which
is so inspirational.
I know I mentioned this every podcast. What music was in the movie that we're doing? That's what I'm blasting in my car. So a lot of Carly Simon was played in my car the last week or so.
And I can't help but feel inspired every time I listen to it.
And I feel too like did they record like 30 versions of that song?
Yeah, I think it was, you told me that the musical score is it credited as Carly Simon or is it someone else, but with a song that's been adapted in a billion different, the same song that's altered.
It is altered, but there's also like, just when I was listening to, there's like different versions, like she did an acoustic version and then there's like a version with a choir and
where she's just like humming over the whole thing.
But all like fantastic.
Yeah.
You know. So we're doing the 30th anniversary, happy 30th anniversary to Working Girl. We will talk about that movie. Our pick of the weeks.
What's your pick of the week?
My pick of the week, to relate it to Working Girl, I chose Pacific Heights, which starred Melanie Griffith.
I have not seen that movie.
Really?
You're going to have to let me borrow that.
All right, yeah, I will let you borrow it. And that was Working Girl and Pacific Heights are like the two that I could, when I was researching, the only two main Melanie Griffith films that would be considered like hits.
You know, I don't know why that's so surprising to me, because I feel like I've seen maybe I have seen countless Melanie Griffith movies. It just feels like she's always a big name. I think of her as a blockbuster movie actress. Yeah.
Well, I thought she carried both movies.
Yeah.
I mean, she's been the lead in a lot of movies, but
Cherry 2000,
what I could see,
I
haven't seen that. Yeah.
Just wait till you see Cherry 2000.
I saw it in the bag that you brought over.
Well, my pick this week is related to Working Girl by way of one of my favorites, Sigourney Weaver. Love that woman. I don't think there's anything that she can do that's bad. But it is 1995's Copycat. It's a psychological thriller And we'll get into that a little bit later.
So I know you brought that for me to watch as well, which I saw that movie when it came out, and I honestly don't remember much about it.
Yeah,
but
it's
then
unfortunate. It got forgotten.
You'd mentioned that you'd read that Sigourney Weaver said that it was one of her roles that she was most proud of, and
I've seen it so many times, and it never gets old.
I like that we do these pick of the weeks for nothing else other than generally we end up just bring the dang movie over.
Yeah.
I'm watching it.
I like that. We should just watch each other's movies directly after recording the podcast.
Sometimes that's the case. Like you leave and I'm like, well, shut my computer off and turn on the television.
It's time.
Yeah.
Gotta put on Copycat at 1 a.m.
That's right.
That's exactly what you sound like too.
Yeah. It was a good spot on. And then, of course, we end each episode with our Murray moment. I say it every time, but I never know what you're going to do, and I just want to keep it that way.
It's hard sometimes because I want to ask you. There were a couple different avenues I could have gone with this one, but I chose not to.
Yeah. Well, now if you ask me, I'll just...
No.
You'll be answered with my silence. So we've got our discussion on Working Girl, we've got our picks of the week, we've got our Murray moment, but before we start a discussion, Lindsay, can you tell us a little bit, what are we going to talk about with Working Girl, and can you give us a summary of the movie? In the event that, I just always worry it's like there's no context if in case you haven't seen the movie, when we do these, you're just like, well, what are we talking about? What are they talking about?
Makes total sense. You don't want to go into this blind. One, we're going to talk about the importance of the two female lead characters, especially during this time in the 80s. Women in the professional area of being in the business arena was kind of like a big thing in the 80s. So kind of talk about the importance of being a woman in the business world, how that works with the whole entire plot of this movie. And then I think we're going to go into talking about the cast. We've got, big hitters, Melanie Griffith, Sigourney Weaver, and Harrison Ford, which interestingly enough, he might be on the cover of the movie, but he's definitely in a supporting role. And in 1988, he was not a supporting actor in 1988.
Yeah, and got top billing as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's good to talk about the cast in the sense that we had talked about this last week. All three of these actors haven't won an Oscar.
What is going on with that?
Yeah.
Well, for some of you that don't know, the plot of Working Girl is basically when an up-and-coming, quietly brave secretary that's played by Melanie Griffith gets this brilliant idea that she has stolen by her boss, played by Sigourney Weaver, who happens to be laid up in the hospital for a few weeks. Melanie Griffith's character seizes and jumps on the opportunity to steal the idea back and basically assume the role of her boss. Again, the plot of this movie, there were a lot of things in the 80s where it was this idea of succeeding, like that was what that's the ultimate thing to do, especially in the world of business. So it's kind of playing on that, but from the point of view of a woman, which, this didn't really happen a lot during that time.
So before we start our discussion, we'll go into our first clip, and this is one where Melanie Griffith has just recently gotten a job working with Sigourney Weaver, and she's talking to her boyfriend, played by Alec Baldwin, about how excited she is about the job, and he's not as enthused.
It's so exciting. I mean, she takes me seriously. And I think it's because, and I know you hate when I say this, but I think it's because she's a woman. There's none of that chasing around the desk crap. And it's like she wants to be my mentor, which is exactly what I needed. I mean, I feel like I'm finally getting somewhere, Mick.
Tess, that's great, but let's step on it or the pizza's gonna freeze, honey. Come on.
Maybe we could all go out sometime, dinner in the city. You would like her, I think.
So this is a movie where really we have these two dynamic characters, Melanie Griffith and Sigourney Weaver, and they are on different playing fields, and again, this is a movie that I think doesn't just show like women in the workplace in the 80s, what that world is, but also the sort of level of classism in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie sort of like skirts down the middle of both of those. But right now we wanted to focus more on like women in the workplace and why this movie is important and why it kind of hits the mark really well for its place in film history.
I feel like the Melanie Griffith character in this movie is different from a lot of any movies where there was a woman trying to come up in the place of business, or even like, I love 9 to 5, but even like 9 to 5. I feel like the Melanie Griffith character really embodies this idea of being incredibly ambitious. She is self-reliant, but she also has this willingness to learn and is not afraid to back down, always stands up for herself. And this is something, that we said before, like she's starting out with this from the onset. And what's interesting is the dynamic between she and Sigourney Weaver, being two representations of different classes of women in a professional field. That being one that is trying to come up in the world, and then one that has already quote unquote made it, right? So we have this idea on how one is trying to inspire the other, or how they are inspiring the other. And then the, conflict then comes when one kind of screws the other one over. And then the Melanie Griffith character reverse tries to not really get her back, but like tries to steal her idea back. In no way do I ever feel that this is catty, or that this is stereotypically like emotional, or like something a woman would do. It seems like a very I feel like that whether it was by direction or by the story itself, it feels like this is just what would happen in that situation, and not because this is a female character. But by presenting this confidence in both of these female characters, it feels like a very positive movie for that to happen in.
And I think too, what you mentioned earlier in the podcast about Harrison Ford really being a secondary character.
Mm-hmm.
I do like that his placement in this film reinforces the role that Tess is trying to play. I think there's a scene where she's got the idea to kind of crash that wedding, and he gets really upset, and she's like, "Don't yell at me," and he's like, "I'm not yelling at you. I'm concerned," because he's looking at her as a peer. He's not looking at her as a woman or somebody who's like lower than him. He's looking her as like the lead person on this, and he's feeling like his ego's a little bit bruised, but at the same time he's like, I'm putting my career on the line here. I mean, he trusts her that much, he's put in the time, and he believes in like her idea,
and he's following her lead. And I think he might even say that once or twice, with her saying the line about "don't yell at me." It is a really interesting point. Like you said, like he's looking at her like a business colleague. And in that moment, it's one of the only moments I feel like she's looking at him like a almost just a male character, not necessarily a colleague, but that being that she's green, in that way, and not kind of reverts back to being treated like crap or something by her ex-boyfriend at the time.
Yeah, and I think even if there's that flash of like a boyfriend yelling at her, as soon as he explains himself,
she's cool.
Rationally, she's like, got it. And then and again, it's just like, that's what I love about her character in this, is that she can assess a situation very quickly and is like on her feet, minute for minute. Like something happens, she realizes maybe I'm in too deep, but then like she assesses the situation, and then like, all right, here we go. Here, quick to think. Quick
and
to come
is this the character?
Idea.
Is this the character, or is this just Melanie Griffith? We can get into that a little bit
right,
later.
Yeah. I think I think part of it's the character, but I do think it's a good build on an arc, and I think that's what makes this movie fascinating. I think in general that's what makes movies to me like get real sucked in and I get real passionate about a movie when I feel like I'm rooting for a character and that I feel like they're confident. I never do I really feel worried about her character, but I still feel like maybe she won't come out of this, but
you keep seeing her kind of just like scrape her teeth a little bit, like she's still making it.
Like, to me, this is this has a really, I don't know if this sounds strange, but this is like a very Rocky vibe for me. And I use Rocky as a way of like certain movies that have that vibe of like the underdog but I think her character is like stronger than a Rocky character because she's not there to take, that's not her thing, is to take abuse. As soon as that abuse comes, she's like, all right, I'm done. This fight's over. I'm moving into a different, whatever. But it does have that sort of vibe of like the underdog, trying to prove themselves and like ultimately being victorious.
So we'll go to another clip, and then we'll get into our discussion on the actors. And then Lindsay, I'm real wanted to talk to you a little bit about why this is one of your favorite movies. So this clip is when another scene where Sigourney Weaver is giving Melanie Griffith some wisdom, some advice, even if it's not under the best of conditions.
Tess, you don't get anywhere in this world by waiting for what you want to come to you. You make it happen. Watch me, Tess. Learn from me. Oh, by the way, I ran your Trask radio idea by some of our people. It seems Trask is dead set on television. But hey, it wasn't out in left field either. I really liked the idea. You just keep plugging and bring me your ideas and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you, Catherine.
Tess, look at me. Who makes it happen?
I do.
Who does?
I do. I make it happen.
That's right. Only then do we get what we deserve.
All right. So who makes it happen?
I do. I make it happen, Justin.
I love that scene.
I know. And it's the one right before you realize, things aren't equal between Sigourney and Melanie Griffith. But it is a really inspirational scene. Granted, Melanie Griffith is, forming Sigourney Weaver's boots to her feet in a very subservient way.
Right.
And I that is something that's not to be looked past, but at the same time,
but I feel like it's said in a way of like, someone will be putting your boots on in the future, like kind of thing.
It is extremely literal in that way. Yeah. Watch me, Tess. Learn from me.
Right.
Exactly. The cast in this is impeccable. I have to say, Harrison Ford, Sigourney Weaver, Melanie Griffith, amazing actors, all in their same right, and to put them all in the same movie, I think it would be hard to not have a movie that works. We mentioned before that none of these actors have ever won an Academy Award, which is mind-blowing to me.
I can understand Melanie Griffith and Harrison Ford, but Sigourney Weaver, I
don't get it.
It's just kind of crazy.
I don't get it. Sigourney is like one of my faves because I can't really name one movie that I dislike her in. And this movie, like, this is one of the only ones where she plays a villain, I feel like. I mean, villain, quote unquote. But yeah, she is a very well-versed theater actor who's even sometimes in movies been made fun of by her castmates for how serious she is.
Yeah.
Blows my mind.
And I think like with Melanie Griffith, I can understand. I think she's perfect for this role, and I think that this is her best role that I've seen her in, because she does have a particular style that's like a little bit. It's a range that's like suitable for certain movies and roles. Like I
would say she is with way more depth, and this is not putting down this actress at all, but with a little more depth, she is like the modern day Marilyn Monroe, I would say. and she's just as beautiful. But I think even Marilyn Monroe had a lot of talent too. I think that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
But Melanie Griffith is not a one-trick pony. She is very talented. She's a good actress. But yeah, I think, like you were saying, Working Girl, she should have gotten an Oscar for this. I mean, she was nominated.
And Harrison Ford, not nominated for this movie, which I totally understand. I mean, his role is
kind of funny.
It's pretty not super noteworthy, but he's only been nominated for Witness out of all the movies he's done in his career.
That seems unfair.
But I do think that he carries along that this sort of like movie star franchise person, franchise actor. So
it doesn't mean he's a bad actor.
No,
He's a
love
great actor.
I love Harrison Ford, and I like what he brings to this movie. I think the cast to this movie is great, and Joan Cusack, who is someone that I think, man, really got pigeonholed like through the 80s and then never really got out from underneath that role, the best friend role.
Yeah.
I think she's a tremendous
totally right.
I think she's a tremendous actress, and I think she was forever kind of stuck in this role, but this was like early in her career, like doing it, perfectly to a T.
Joan Cusack, I feel like is one character that people remember from this movie because she is very visually memorable, as is Melanie Griffith's character when she first starts out in this movie. They're both very like, I mean, I don't know, is it a Jersey look? Are we going for like high hair 80s, like exaggerated makeup, bangles? Like there's a lot going on.
I think that she does play a pivotal role in this movie in the sense that there's a scene, and I'm paraphrasing here, but she says something along the lines of, if you think that Mr. Briefcase is going to sweep you off your feet, and that's not what Melanie Griffith is thinking. Melanie Griffith has got her head is in a completely different place, but Melanie Griffith's boyfriend has like literally just cheated on her 3 days before he proposes to her, and Joan Cusack's character again is coming at her with like, you think you can get better than that, and she's trying to tell her the life that, this is all you should be lucky that you have so much. And it's strange because it's like she's like trying to give her this reality check, but we, the viewer watching Melanie Griffith, already see like where Melanie Griffith is at. But I think it's good that Joan Cusack's character is there, because I think she's the push that gives Tess she gives Tess that extra push, because she doesn't believe in her. She even says, Joan Cusack says something like, just because I dance around in my underwear doesn't mean I'm Madonna, and I never will be. And she is only seeing Tess as like playing this role, not that she could actually become the role.
Exactly. And I don't think that is any fault of that character. I think it's just what we see as the viewer. So her, from the best friend point of view, this is what she's seeing, and she is being a supportive friend.
Yeah.
We're seeing the whole gamut of actually what's going on.
And even though that's there, I think if like you omitted her calling Joan Cusack at the end and Joan Cusack like putting her arms up in the air, like and like focusing in on that, like while the music swells, I think if you omitted that, even though her character didn't believe in her, the ending wouldn't have the punch that it has. Like that sort of like,
because
like,
she's been there the whole movie.
And she, Melanie Griffith like proved wrong. It's like, no, I guess where I am, like, and it's I think it is I think the casting and the characters are what makes this movie so great. I think that what gives the movie drive, and it's what makes it so engrossing. Just before we close out our discussion on Working Girl, this being one of your favorites, I just kind of wanted to get a little bit of where you're, how this movie, was this something that you grew up watching, and how this movie. It's always interesting to me when someone says something is their favorite movie, like the genesis of that, like how that came to be. So do you mind just kind of giving me a little bit of...
No, not at all. I for sure will always blame my mom for my love of this movie, because I think that she was always someone that was trying to be a brave, confident person in the workplace. Like, she wasn't a stay-at-home mom. There's nothing wrong with that. But that she was being a working mother and trying to be respected. And, as I got older, hearing stories about how she wasn't respected. And so I think she looked to Working Girl, because my mom loves movies, that's why I do, as something that was inspirational. I feel like I always got that vibe from the movie. And one thing that I've always appreciated about it is that every character in it is independent by themselves. So we've got strong woman number one, strong woman number two, man that is somewhat incidental, and the romantic part of the story is kind of a subplot. And that it is a story about success that is not, I think I referenced to you Michael J. Fox's The Secret of My Success, which is nothing to be, it is not an inspirational movie. It is a story about cunning and like nothing cool. This is a movie about being confident, realizing who you are, and no matter what you have to do. It, in a lot of ways, the Working Girl is very cutthroat, like even more than like Wall Street. Like of the same, like I forget when Wall Street came out, if it was like 89 or something, but right around the same time. It's kind of, maybe it was before that, 87. But in a lot of ways, I feel like Working Girl is very cutthroat in that way. But to me, watching it as a youngster and as an adult, it was always inspiring. And I think that hit a crux in my life, like the first and only time that I got fired from a job. And it was a complete surprise. And when that happened, the first thing I did, and I'm not joking, the first thing I did when I got in my car and like had a little cry, was I put on the Carly Simon song from Working Girl, and I went home and I friggin' watched that movie, and I cried a lot. But it made me feel better at that time when you feel just like alone and just like things aren't going to get better right now. But I feel like Working Girl is a very inspiring movie, and no matter how you look at it, how the female characters interact, or there's so much in this movie to pull you up by your bootstraps and kind of push you to go on.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like anytime you hear a movie can be inspiring, but in a way of like, it's movies can do that, you know what I mean? And the only thing last thing I wanted to add about this, this movie was a big success, and I was trying to think of like, okay, anytime a movie is a big success in Hollywood, this movie made something like $100 million in the late 80s for a, mildly budgeted movie that it was like a big success. And usually the trend in Hollywood is like, this was a success. These are the stories that people want to see. Like if a Western did good in the 90s, you'd see like 5 Westerns come out, whether people wanted them or not, Hollywood just like, people want to see Westerns again, and so they make like 5 of them. But you didn't see a string of like movies about strong female characters working in the workplace that came out after this. And I actually like went and looked up. I was like trying to find, like, did this trend out? And the closest thing I could find was like Erin Brockovich, which came out like 12 years later.
It was quite a long time after.
But one thing about this movie, I think like there was another movie in the 80s that came out maybe a year before this called Baby Boom. And it was like,
yeah,
but that's the thing is like the big focus was it's like a woman trying to work in a workplace, but she has a kid. And this movie is not really they never really stop the movie and say, well, what about kids? It's never a question like, can you, that's not something that comes into play. And I don't know. It was just something that stuck out to me on the last watch that I did that that was kind of interesting.
Yeah. I think going along with that, this movie has a thing that is mixing almost like a fairy tale type of story in with the reality that was in the late 80s. So we've got this idea of like a powerless, ugly duckling of sorts that's turned into this sexy swan in some ways, right? Mixed with the reality of this like woman that's incredibly perseverant in a world that is male dominated. So we've got this reality and then this fake reality, and I think this movie does a good thing of like combining those things. And I don't think that it's necessarily like completely reality based, but I think that the mixture of those things is what helps to create a good movie.
Yeah, I agree. I'll go back to my why the Rocky vibe I get from this is like like a fairy tale story, but yet it's based in like has like a gritty realism to it. But it's like also like a really entertaining movie. Like everything's like all combined into one. But yeah, really great film. I really have enjoyed like kind of going through this one, you know.
And I really challenge you to write down all of the quotes from this movie because there are some real good ones.
What a slob.
You were so smooth with him. I probably would have.
Never burn bridges. Today's junior prick, tomorrow's senior partner. So, how do you think the party's going?
Pretty well, I think. Should I stop serving now?
Better make one more round.
Right.
I'd love to help you, but you can't busy the quarterback with passing out the Gatorade. Arnie, my hero, you've come.
I mean, these are life lessons, really.
Every quote is a life lesson.
Watch the movie. You will extrapolate all of these quotes from this movie. Really take in Joan Cusack's hair and eye makeup.
Yeah, in this movie, you know, aside from the look, again, any movie that we do from the 80s, it's like, you know, there's this movie you hold up and it's like, of course, the look of this movie is 80s, but it has something that it's almost like it's like this great movie, but in like a time capsule sort of
I mean,
way.
aside from shoulder pads and
Right.
like kind of like bigger curly hair, whatever, it holds up.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Well, thank you for sharing your love
intimate.
Your intimateness of this of this.
I am more than happy to share what Working Girl meant to me. I think a lot of it stems from my childhood, and then it was even though through not like the best experience as an adult, it was so cathartic.
Yeah. I think I like texted you like 3 options of like, I was like, oh, I think we should do like an anniversary movie. And then like, this was one of the ones I put in there, and it was like, I just like,
no question.
You were like, all of these are good. And then there was like a lot of exclamation points about us doing Working Girl. So I was like, all right, let's do it. So thanks for sharing your thoughts on, you know, how this movie like was a big part of your.
I hope it inspires somebody to watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to our pick of the week. Our picks of the week, as always, we try to each watch a movie, each pick a movie that we both feel is not necessarily the greatest movie in the world, but it's one that, you know, we think deserves a little bit of attention, and we try to connect it to our main movie of discussion. I picked Pacific Heights, which I connected via Melanie Griffith. I usually go for the easy way to connect a movie, which is fine. But you know what? That's my deal.
Yeah, that's fine. Tell me a little bit about it.
Pacific Heights. What was your pick before I?
Mine is Copycat with Sigourney Weaver from 1995.
So I'm glad they were both doing thrillers from the 90s, because I think these are two of the better that came out during that time, especially when there was just so many in the wake of the success of Fatal Attraction, thrillers involving crazy roommate, crazy babysitter, crazy temp, or movies dealing with serial killers and that being tied like crime thrillers. The Pacific Heights follows along the model of the same, like I said, him being the crazy tenant, and the story revolves around Melanie Griffith and Matthew Modine,
They're a young couple who decide to buy a fixer-upper in San Francisco, the idea being that they'll be able to rent out 2 of the units once the place is fixed, but because they're sinking their entire savings into it, if this plan doesn't work out, they're both done for. And so there's a lot of pressure to get these places rented after they fix it up, and because of the pressure, they end up renting to Michael Keaton. He sort of swabs his way in because he's got a Porsche and is wearing a suit, and they don't sign a lease with him, and he ends up moving in. And his deal is he knows all the ways to take advantage of landlords, and he knows the system very well. So eventually starts becoming very creepy, creating havoc on their lives to the point where they want to kick him out, but now that they can't, and he eventually starts tearing up their places, doing a lot of other malicious, really kind of crazy things. And we start to learn that this isn't the first time he's done this before. What I do like about this movie is that you sort of get 2 movies in one. The first half is kind of what we've seen before, like I said, that pattern, that model of a movie. He's the crazy tenant. But the second half of the movie is what I find to be more interesting. And the first half of the movie is kind of Matthew Modine's movie. He's gets to really, he's like the stressed out partner that is angry and uses violence as a way to solve problems. And the second half of the movie becomes Melanie Griffith's film, where she takes it on her own. She decides to be more cunning and says, Michael Keaton ruined our lives, so I'm going to go ruin his. So she starts tracking him down and trying to do all the things to him that he did to them, and ruin his life, and show people that he's a fraud. And so gets a little cat and mousey, but again, I think the performances are really strong. And like I said, because we get this 2 movies in one, we kind of switch gears after the first part. The movie just doesn't end with them kicking him out of their house, which I think is where most movies like this during that time period would have ended. And Melanie Griffith and Matthew Modine are really great in this, but really the thing I like the most about it is Michael Keaton. I think he's always been the actor that has surprised people. He started out doing comedy, and people didn't think that he could do a dramatic turn, and then he turned in a great performance in Clean and Sober, if you haven't seen it. And people didn't think that he could be an action star and play Batman, and I thought did that really perfectly. And I think this is him playing a really chilling, kind of creepy character. I think he does that really well. I think he has a wide range, and this is one of his sort of not as talked about roles. And I think it's kind of nice. It's not so one note. I think he adds a little depth there. They do make him sort of unnecessarily psychotic at times, but I think it works in the realm of a thriller. I think this is a very entertaining. This is one of those ones where it's the perfect Sunday afternoon. You want to throw something on and just kind of be entertained for about 2 hours.
I think movies like that, whether it's like a home invasion or anything that's so intimate like that, to me, no matter if you have a lot of suspension of disbelief or not, like those are always going to get me. I would really like to borrow that from you, from that description. I purposefully did not read up on the subject matter since I've not seen it, so I would like to borrow that from you if you own it.
I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to own that.
I watched
that.
I watched my own personal copy.
Okay.
That you can borrow after this podcast.
It makes sense that we'll actually own all these movies.
We'll swap out our picks of the week.
Picks of the week.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
So you picked Copycat, which is a movie that I can't really remember. I know I saw, and I'm a huge true crime fan, so I read
it's
back
a good
up
one
on
for
it.
that.
Like, man, I kind of remember this, and I remember like Harry Connick Jr.'s in it, and
which is hilarious.
Right.
So I'm also a hardcore sucker for a good thriller, especially if it has to do with a serial killer or a true crime story or a fictional one inspired by true events. So Copycat is starring working girl Sigourney Weaver. It's about a San Francisco serial killer who's grotesquely recreating multiple murder scenes from famous serial killers of the past. And yet again, I know I've already said this, but Sigourney is flawless. This time with her portrayal as an agoraphobic expert psychologist who has had serial killers on the brain for over 20 years or something like that. She's an all-around smarty pants, intuitive woman who has the unfortunate talent of understanding the minds of serial killers more than pretty much anyone. I mean, I love this woman as an actress. She's always a master at everything she does, and Copycat is no exception. That being said, definitely not to be outdone, Holly Hunter also stars in this movie and gives a top-notch performance as the lead cop on the tail of the serial killer. Her character is easily comparable to Clarice Starling of Silence of the Lambs, but Hunter is she's way too particular and has way too many personal touches to this performance that uniquely sets her apart from, our dear old Clarice. From the outset, this movie starts out running. We know that we're in for a stalker killer type of thriller. Throw in a cop story and agoraphobic angle, slightly suggested sexual tension. Snarky, dark humor sprinkled in. And this all under multiple different types of murders that have no pattern, that keep you guessing. There are so few slow moments in this movie. And if you don't know a lot about serial killers or, historic ones of the past, this movie is a great mini lesson on that subject. Or for that matter, what agoraphobia is. I didn't know when I was, 11 or 12, however old I was, and how it's handled and how Sigourney did a lot of research on agoraphobia for this part, and she nailed it pretty expertly, as expected. I'm going to stop going off on how much I love her, okay? I promise.
Do you like Sigourney Weaver?
I might a little bit. Just wait till I talk about Death and the Maiden. We'll get there.
Okay.
So years after the movie's release, Sigourney would state that she was extremely proud of this movie, actually, and she went on to say that at the time, we'd already kind of touched on this, that the thriller market was so saturated at the time, and she felt like Copycat never got the attention that it deserved, but she was always super proud of that movie. A little fun kind of throw in that Justin mentioned is that, Harry Connick Jr. does play an imprisoned, playful, sick, backwoods serial killer obsessed with Sigourney's character, which is really funny, especially if you like Harry Connick Jr., because he is not at all what you were used to seeing him as. And he does it really well, too. And also the lovable Dermot Mulroney, who I've always liked that guy as an actor, too.
Yeah, I like him.
Yeah. He plays Holly Hunter's partner, kind of the Watson to her Sherlock in the most sensitive of ways. So the paranoia, tension, and the stalky creep factors are on super high in this one. If you love Sigourney Weaver, this is totally a must. It's a great movie, and it kind of makes you feel a little bit like you're an investigator yourself, which is always fun.
Yeah, I hope I didn't steal your thunder on the Sigourney Weaver quote in the beginning, but that's when you told me that's what really wanted me to revisit
what was the quote?
Her saying that this was like one of her proudest movies.
No. I mean, I love that she even said that, because I've always liked this movie, but then when I saw that, I was like, man, I'm glad that she feels the same way. Because
anytime I hear an actor say something like, "Oh, this is my," of all the films I've done, this is my favorite. That's like immediately I'm like, I got to go rewatch that. What was it?
Yeah.
Once you leave tonight, I'm probably going to be watching Copycat.
Just wait till you get to him saying squirrel covers. That's all I got to say.
Like on your ride home, just, be like, yeah.
I can't wait for you to watch every scene with Harry Connick Jr. and Copycat.
Because he is a very like when I think of Harry Connick Jr., I just think of like this like sort of like very like the cleanest performer that you can, you know, imagine. So
it's like they were like, so Harry, you're going to be in Copycat and we're going to have you play like the worst version of someone that's not you at all. That's what we're going to have you be right now, actually.
And I'm the other thing I don't want you to tell me because I'm excited to watch the movie is what the
I'm excited for you to watch the movie.
I'm curious because I can't remember what the Copycat murders were. Okay, well,
is it that time?
It is that time.
Okay.
You know what? I don't really think at this point we're at, what are we, 7 episodes in? This is your Murray moment.
Chicks dig me because I rarely wear underwear, and when I do, it's usually something unusual.
I think I need a root canal. I'm sure I need a long, slow root canal.
You gonna come and shake my monkey tree again?
Oh, what does that old queen know? She didn't even show.
Hey, this is so scrumptious. Is this hand shut?
The flowing robes, the grace, all striking.
That was fun.
If you know Bill Murray, you've seen or at least know of Ghostbusters. The first one is A Magical Feat. The directors Ivan Reitman and writers Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, who also starred, of course, were at the top of their game. So this movie was supremely executed by the entire cast. It's a solid story about a completely unbelievable subject, that being 4 guys who catch ghosts around New York and stop an apocalypse. No big, right? Now, with Ghostbusters II, which happened to be Sigourney Weaver's next film after Working Girl in 1989, this sequel didn't end up being Billy's most favorite. He said that the sequel was, quote, unsatisfying to him, and that the first one was a near perfect film, which we both could agree upon, but that first one had the goods, he said. Years later, there was this idea for a sequel that had been pitched by Aykroyd and Ramis. The guys got together, had a lot of laughs, and even though Murray was reluctant on it, they all decided to push forward on the project. When Billy, and this is according to him, when he arrived on the set to start filming, he said that it just wasn't the same movie that he signed on for anyway. He ended up being very disappointed with the final project. He also was not too stoked about the special effects. I feel like before I actually knew kind of the nitty gritty about this, I feel like you can kind of sense that Billy's he had a certain disinterest if you rewatch the movie now. Like maybe I thought that when I was younger, but I feel like you can kind of sense that when you rewatch it now. It's not overt, but I think that it's not the same Peter Venkman that we remember from the 1984 classic. He has said that there were a lot of good laughs in the sequel, a lot of funny scenes, or I should actually say a few funny scenes, not a lot. But it just wasn't the same movie he signed on to do. He said that it felt like it was more about the franchise of Ghostbusters rather than an actual movie or a sequel itself. It's funny how things work, though. Billy dragging his feet on Ghostbusters 3 was in direct response to his feelings on what happened with the initial sequel and the underwhelming critical reception of it. I believe that the first idea, from what I've read, like the first installment was going to be something like Ghostbusters in Hell or Ghostbusters Hellbent, something to do with that. There's not like really a clear idea. It's kind of a lot of things to do with the Ghostbusters in Hell, and even like Manhattan being called Manhattan, which really didn't go over well with Billy. After being unpleased with the initial sequel, it's easy to see why he took more than a few years to ever thinking about doing a third one. So this Billy being unsatisfied with Ghostbusters 2 was the ultimate reason behind why the reinvention of the franchise was done with an all-female cast. Think what you will of the 2016, right? Yeah, 2016 film, the new Ghostbusters.
I'll go on record to say I really enjoyed the new Ghostbusters.
I did too, really, and I'm glad that they went the route that they did, honestly. Like, I'm glad that it didn't go with the original guys.
I thought that it was funny and that's what it was supposed to be, but also a loving tribute to the original.
Exactly. And I think it says a lot. I'm going along with that. I think it says a lot, and it's pretty special that pretty much all of the same main actors, except for like Annie Potts and Rick Moranis, all did cameo roles. Even Billy, who at the end was not reluctant at all for his part. I thought that says something incredibly special about it, and that everybody was like, okay, we're not doing one with all of us as the main characters, but we're going to endorse the hell out of this, and it's going to be okay. Now, getting back to Ghostbusters 2, personally, I'm always really going to like it. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I grew up on it and know it by heart. Yes, there's the introduction of the mood slime concept that really didn't strike fear into the hearts of Americans. The special effects were not as scary as the original, kind of more cartoon-like, which also kind of correlated at the same time with the cartoon, The Real Ghostbusters. So it's kind of like more cartoony, just like more palatable, less real as the 1984 original version. So I think Billy is right that the sequel didn't have the same brilliant magic as the first film, but what could really ever touch that classic, in my opinion, even if it's by the same writers or same director? Probably nothing. So, Billy, you write about the sequel, but it doesn't mean that I don't own 2 copies of it and watch it every time it's on TV.
So, yeah, I mean, Ghostbusters 2, it's, I think we both come from different angles, but we can both agree it's, you know, I mean, it is what it is. I don't know.
I'm never going to not watch it. If it's on TV, like, I'm going to be like, oh yeah, Ghostbusters 2, sure. Yeah, bam, put it on. It's not a bad movie. It might be cheesy. Bill Murray might think that it sucks for like whatever reason, and it's different when you're involved with a movie, that you can feel like, you know, it's different when you're involved with a movie and you can see the intricate details of things involved and be like, this is not the same as before. But you know, that's like different from a first-time viewer or someone that just loves the franchise, that is willing to accept anything that's given to them. Yeah. And I think honestly, like, that's what I was, as someone that loved the first movie so much, and like my favorite movie of all time, going on record, favorite movie of all time, first Ghostbusters. The sequel, it could be the biggest piece of crap out there, and I would still find something like redeeming in it. But I don't even think that it's that. Like, I there is a lot of redeeming qualities in the sequel. Yeah. I don't side with Billy on that, but I'm sure it could have been better in his eyes. Yeah. Maybe everyone's eyes.
So it's time to start closing out here. Lindsay, thanks again for sharing your personal experiences with the film Working Girl. I'm really glad that we were able to pick one of your favorite films to do for this episode.
I mean, it's a movie that above a lot of movies that we talk about, it is something that's very practical and very like real life. So yeah, I'm glad to reinvigorate maybe people to see this movie.
And I like what you pointed out, like if you said if you've recently been fired from a movie, you know, this is a movie that I saw for the first time, like not having ever worked in my life, like as a kid. So watching this movie after having worked for like 20 years, it has a larger impact. And again, it's like, it's like the Rocky movie of like trying to get the job of your dreams. You're trying to like achieve that goal that I think most Americans want, most people want, and that's like doing something that you enjoy and getting paid for it. You know, I mean, as simple as that. Yeah. And I think this movie taps into that a little bit and shows us that world in a way that's fascinating and interesting, and it's you know, like you said earlier, like a little bit fairy tale, but is believable and entertaining, all wrapped up into one movie.
I've always liked that you've likened it to Rocky, because it is just, I mean, by the essence of its name, like having girl in the title, like it gives off the essence of being like a feminine movie or something that only would appeal to female identified folks. But I think that that's not necessarily true, and it's just really anyone that is in this position of any type of gender, minority, sexual orientation, whatever you are, anyone that is marginalized and feels like they have to really climb to the top to make it and to get by. I feel like this movie is such a good representation of that. And yeah, did work for me when I got fired. Thanks for sitting through that story. And 100% true.
And if you're a listener who is younger and this is a film that you haven't seen and you watched it, please email us, because I'm actually curious, like, you know, in the working force today, if you're just starting out, how this movie plays to you. If you want to contact us, you can reach us at don'tpushpausepodcast@gmail.com. Again, if you're not already following us, we're on Instagram, Don't Push Pause Podcast, Facebook, Don't Push Pause Podcast. Or you can just go to us directly at don'tpushpausepodcast.com. We love hearing from people.
We really do.
It's always great.
Thank you, guys.
For movie to movie, it's interesting when we hear a thought from somebody, like what movies drive them, or there's always someone that poses a suggestion, and sometimes you know, we already have it in the works, or we take it under consideration, a movie that we might do in the future. Yeah. And next podcast, we're sticking with our summer, kind of like summer theme, but we're like kind of like end of summer, or like kind of like summer fading out. We're going to do Stand By Me, which I always kind of feel it's just such a touching movie, but I always think of it as like the end of summer. It's like that ritual of things that I do, like dead of summer, I watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The end of summer, ritually, I watch Stand By Me. It's one of the last things you do before.
In between that, you get a job at a high corporate facility, right?
Yeah,
Working girl.
That's what I do.
That's what you do. Yeah. But Stand By Me, I can't wait for that one. I don't know how many times I saw that as a kid growing up, but it is such a great coming of age movie. Yeah. And if you haven't seen it, it'd be cool if you could check it out before the podcast, but if not, I mean, we're going to tell you about it anyway.
Yeah, I would think it's one of all the movies we've done, I would think it would be the one that's the most well known, but maybe not. It's hard to say. I don't know. Sometimes I don't know what has carried over, you know, to the next generation. Not to sound like an old.
No. I mean, that's one of the things, like us jumping around to different genres and different years. It's like, who knows who's seen what? Like, you know, you haven't seen this horror movie, but maybe you've seen Stand By Me or Working Girl because of your mom. You know, it's kind of hard to tell. So, Stand By Me, though, I feel like, I feel like with any coming of age movie, you always feel closer to that one. So that's why I say, if you haven't seen it, and you know, are listening to our podcast, try to check it out before you listen to us. It's not a necessity. It's just because it's a really great movie. And it's just nostalgic. Yeah. And heartwarming. That's all.
Well, we hope to hear from you, and excited for the next podcast. Until then, I'm Justin Johnson.
And I'm Lindsay Reaver.
Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you, guys.